Hey everyone, it's your friend and colleague Jesse Green, and you're listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's wonderful to have your company for the show. Now, last episode, we spoke about the conversation that most practice owners avoid and why avoidance is costing them more than the conversation ever would. So today, we're going to get into the mechanics of that conversation, the framework, the phrases that we use, and the tactics that stop you losing control when things can get a little heated. Now, chances are you've got someone on your team right now who you need to have this conversation with. And today I'm going to give you the tools to actually have that conversation. The reason most practice owners avoid these conversations come back to fear. And it's the fear of how the other person's going to react. Are they going to get angry? Are they going to get emotional and cry and get all teary? Or are they going to quit? All these fears can lead to avoidance. But the problem with avoidance is it doesn't address anything, and the problem actually gets worse. And it gets worse because the thing that's been frustrating us compounds and resentment can build. And all of a sudden, when we least expect it, we can snap at something seemingly minor. But on top of that, if we don't address the problems in front of us, it sets the standard for the rest of the team. And we can have good players suddenly start to perform like poor players because they realize we're going to tolerate poor things in our practice. And equally, you can lose good people because they don't want to hang around poor performers. So ultimately, if you want your practice to grow and thrive, you need to find the courage to have the conversation. If you're going to have the conversation, it's important to know that the quality of the conversation is dictated by three key parameters. The first is actually knowing the outcome you're trying to achieve. Well, why am I having this conversation in the first place? And what am I trying to get at the end of it? So that's key number one. Key number two is to have a structure to follow. And I'm talking about a framework here. A framework will give you conversational structure, but also give you the flexibility to respond in the moment, depending on what's coming back at you from the other person in terms of conversation. And the third key to a successful conversation is preparation. And so preparation comes in two forms. It's the words that you're going to say, but also the emotions that could come up. And I really want to just hone in on that for a moment, because oftentimes the emotions that bubble to the surface, if they're not dealt with well, can derail the whole conversation. So it's really important to be aware of your emotions as well as the other person's potential emotions. With your emotions, just name it, right? So you don't need to take that emotion into the conversation, but name it beforehand so it doesn't slip out into the way you interact with that other person. Now, the framework itself begins by setting the frame for the conversation, which sounds like double Dutch when I say it like that. But really, if you want to control the conversation, you set the parameters of the conversation. So it means I'd like to talk to you about such and such. It should take us about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is. And then you begin with the facts. These are the things that you've either heard, seen, observed, or whatever it is. Rather than leading with you always do this or whatever, you want to get some facts onto the table so that we can agree on what we're talking about. I noticed this, I observed that, I heard such and such. And once you've been able to agree on those facts, we need to then seek their perspective. Help me understand your perspective on this, or what's your take on this, and then listen without interruption, okay? Without planning your next sentence, just listen to what they have to say. And then what you want to be able to do is to then share your perspective, which might include the impact of what it is you're dealing with. Maybe they're totally unaware of the impact of what's happening, but you go back and forth a little bit there between their perspective and your perspective. And what you're trying to do is to understand their perspective, and what you're hoping that they'll do is understand your perspective so that you can then agree on a pathway forward together. And this is about having ownership taken by the other person rather than delivering an ultimatum. And finally, you want to go back in and check how things have gone. You want to make sure you have follow-up. So it's not just a conversation that has no follow-up. You want to set a time and a date to follow up on whatever needs to occur as a result of this conversation. Now, this framework has been perhaps one of the most popular frameworks I've written for our Practice Facts clients. And it came about because I was always asked to help people have what we call a necessary conversation. If you use this framework, I promise you, you're going to get way better outcomes. You're going to be able to address the things that need to be addressed without emotions running over and creating unintended consequences. And that is a good thing. This is one of the key leadership conversations every practice owner needs to have in their toolkit. So remember, the conversation that you avoid is actually the conversation that controls you. So make sure you buckle up and have the courage to have the conversation that you know you need to have. Now, I did speak a little bit about emotions, and I've had many necessary conversations over the years. And I remember on one particular occasion, I thought about the emotions that could come up, and as I was having the necessary conversation, surely those emotions did come up. And the person, I thought, might say some hurtful things, and they did say some hurtful things. But what I'd done in that particular situation is, because I anticipated that this could occur, I'd written myself a little post-it note. And on that post-it note, I'd written, "Don't take the bait." And so as I was having the conversation with this person, I had this post-it note in my fingers, and I was just holding a very tactile kind of reminder of not to take the bait. And so as this person said things, and she said things to me that were hurtful or very emotionally charged, all I could think to myself was, okay, don't take the bait, don't rise to it, just let it wash over you, let it go through to the keeper, all those sorts of things. And the reason that was important was because if I'd taken the bait, it would have become a very heated conversation. Any sense of decency might have been lost. Certainly the outcome would have been not achieved at all, and it would have just been an argument rather than a conversation about things that needed to be addressed. So remember, it's important to not rise to those emotional barbs that might come your way and let it wash over you. And that requires, again, a bit of preparation, a bit of planning, so you know what emotions could come up for you, what emotions could come up for them, things they might say, and how you're just going to ignore it. Now, I think it's really interesting to remember that when you do get into those situations, you're going to need a couple of phrases as well. And you might say, look, that's outside the scope of what we're going to be talking about today, or right now I want to focus on whatever it is we're talking about, okay? And sometimes when you're having a necessary conversation, you might be thinking, did I hire the right person here? Did I actually bring the right person into the team? And so it's very important that, when you're hiring, again, you are attracting the best and brightest people to your practice. And it's also important to remember that the best and brightest people have options available to them. And so when you're hiring someone and you've got a genuinely great candidate sitting across the desk from you, also understand, as much as they're pitching you, you've got to pitch them as well. And what we need to be able to do is to create what we call a magnetic job offer, which talks about the clarity of the role, the culture fit, the growth pathways involved, what autonomy is in place within the structure of the practice, and so on and so forth. So the job offer is more than just a salary. It's the story about working at your practice looks like. And so if you have a job offer that reads like a bullet point of, you've got to do this, this, and this, perhaps it's time to rewrite that job offer and make it an invitation, make it a story rather than just a bulletin board or notice board agenda item. So remember, when it comes to having these necessary conversations, it could be a hiring problem. Maybe you've hired the wrong person, but no matter what happens, whether it's the right person or the wrong person on your team, when these conversations occur, it's very important to not take the bait, because otherwise the whole thing blows up and gets derailed. And what's really interesting to understand about that is once you get to see other people's perspective, it allows you to have better necessary conversations. It allows you to see things in a light that you might not otherwise see, and it allows you to reach agreement on a way forward much more readily than if you sit there just in your own perspective without ever truly appreciating someone else's. So again, it's really important to get that perspective, take a look around your own practice, see how other people see things, and I guarantee it's going to improve the quality of the conversations that you have with your team members. All right, so I'm going to head into Q&A because this section has become really popular in the podcast, and I've got a question from Priya, who's in Brisbane. And Priya asks, why can't my team just do the job? It's really not that hard. So I want to say to you, Priya, every single practice owner I've ever encountered has had this exact same frustration. It's almost universal. But here's the situation. Here's the truth, right? If the person can't do what you're asking them, and specifically if other people can't do that thing too, then it's most likely a systems problem rather than a people problem. And so we need to ask ourselves, are our expectations really clear? Has the process and the expectation been written down? Was it demonstrated clearly to the team members so they know how to do it? And so really there's three big gaps that crop up. The first gap is a clarity gap. In other words, have we documented how to do it, what to do? Have we documented our expectations really well? The second gap is a capability gap, which means that there's a skills deficiency. Do we need to do more training? Do they have the required ability to do what we're asking them to do? And then the third gap is really commitment gap, which means, do they want to do it, or are they just skiving off? Now, each of these gaps require different solutions. So you need to understand, is the fact that they're not doing it because we haven't been clear, or is it because we haven't trained them adequately and they don't have the skills, or is it because there's an attitude issue there? And you need to approach each of those gaps very differently. So I promise you, if you can get clear on that, Priya, it's going to make life a whole lot easier for you. So I offer that to you as a bit of a solution. All right, gang, so that's it from today. Next week, we're going to be switching gears and we're going to be talking about marketing, but with a concept that's going to flip what you think about the patient experience. And I'm going to share with you some results and some insights that come from a study about hotel stays and paracetamol. So stay with me for that one. It's going to be incredible. Can't wait to see you next week. Take good care. Until then, bye for now. Hey everyone, it's Jesse here. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the podcast. If you're looking for some more tools, some more insights, some more inspiration to help you create a practice that you love, as well as a life that you love, well, head across to savvydentist.com and check out all the goodies that we have there waiting for you right now.